What's up, folks? Four-wheeler doctor again. Going a little out of my element here and working on another dang dirt bike. This is not something I normally do, but I always like a challenge, and this guy here is one of my frequent four-wheeler customers. He went out and bought this thing and had a bunch of work done to the motor on it. The guy before him did, and the guy before him rode it a few times, and this guy's rode it a few times, and now it's doing something. Sounds like something in the bottom end. He seems to think it's in the crankshaft, but when you kick it over, it don't even sound like the pistons going up and down. There's little to no resistance on the kickstart, no kind of noise in the motor or anything. So I don't know what it's doing. He just said he was riding it down the road and it quit. So I'm gonna pull the motor off of this thing, see what I can do. I don't do many two-strokes, but like I say, I'm always up for a challenge. So let me see if I can get this thing tore apart. Probably gonna start off with taking the exhaust off, be the first thing. Drain the coolant out. Probably go ahead and drain the oil out of it too, if I can, with it sitting on this bucket. But I'll do those few things and cut the camera back on when I get tore into it a little bit. Alright guys, I got the coolant drained out. Take this Allen head bolt out here and take the radiator cap off. It'll drain the coolant out of it. Got the engine bolts loose. Nuts taken off of both of those, as well as this back bolt. These are 14 millimeter, the two front ones. This rear one, actually the nuts on the other side, this side holds itself. It's a 22 millimeter. There's a coolant hose up here at the top. I'm gonna have to take the gas tank off in order to get to that. So I'm gonna pull the gas tank off now. Also gonna pull this coolant hose off, and probably just gonna undo the clamp on the carburetor here at the intake and let that slide forward and pull the chain off, and it'll be about ready to come off. So let me work at getting this gas tank off. I think you got to take these two, normally you take these two back seat bolts out here and here, slide the seat back, and a couple bolts here at the definitely one here that holds it to the radiator on the other side, and there's usually something here in the middle that holds the tank down. So I'm gonna take those off just so I can get to that coolant hose, and then we'll see what else we have to do to get it off. I'll cut the camera back on in a sec. Alright guys, got the gas tank off. There's actually two little hidden bolts in the side here. They're in these bottom vent holes here to get the gas tank to come loose. And now this is what I was trying to get off, this top radiator hose. So loosen it up, and also pull the one off the other side. And there's a little bit of wiring on this that I'm gonna have to take loose. I'm not real sure. I'll have to figure out where the wires go. So I completely forgot about them. So get the wiring loose and get the other radiator hose off, and I'll cut the camera back on and give you a recap here in a second. Alright guys, I went ahead and pulled the flywheel stator cover off this side. I think that's the only way you're going to be able to get this this cable loose. So you can just pull this arm up on it, and the cable will come loose and pull out. Also, there's some wiring that comes out of here for your stator. It plugs in right here. You just unplug that, and there's actually a little cable tie around it right here, so you just pull that out of the frame. And I'm pretty sure that's the only things you have to take loose. Like I said before, I'm not going to take I'm going to try to do this and not take the carburetor off the bike. I'm just going to loosen this clamp and this boot up here, slide it back like that, and hopefully I can get the motor to slide forward. And I also need to take off this chain guard here, 2 8mm bolts, and then I believe there's a snap ring around that sprocket. Probably going to end up having to take that snap ring off to slide the sprocket off so you can get the chain off. It might be just as easy to do that master link, but I don't know. I'll probably have him take that sprocket off anyway if I pull the motor apart, so may as well do it now. Alright, so let me do that and I'll cut the camera back on. Alright guys, I got the cable loose here. Just stuck a screwdriver on there and pried up on it a little bit to get some slack in it. It's got the cable loose. Shoot, the master link was already right here, so I just pulled this chain guard off and popped the link off to get the chain off. And then the most obvious thing that I hadn't mentioned yet is there's a mount here on the top of the head that has to come off. This is a 14mm bolt just like these other two, and these are 12s up here. So you have to take those off, and you have to take this whole bracket off in order to let the motor move around like it needs to. So once I get that off, I've got the one line loose here, the carburetor slid back, the coolant line's loose. I need to take both of these bolts out, which this one here just comes right out. The bottom one's a little bit tighter, so I'll probably get a crowbar and pry up under here to get this one where to slide out. Then I'll probably take a punch and knock this one out, because it actually holds the swing arm as well as the motor in. So I'll knock it out, but don't want to knock it all the way out so it'll still hold the swing arm in. Then once I get the motor slid out, I'll knock this back in so I can at least roll the bike around. So let me get this bracket off and get both of these bolts somewhat loose, and then I'll start knocking this thing out, and the motor should flop around in there now, or in there then, until to where we can just slide it right out. So I'll cut the camera back on when I get it loose. Alright, so I got this thing knocked through with a punch. Once it got so far over, I ended up having to push this brake lever down because the end of the bolt will hit the brake lever, and then I put a pair of vice grips on it and just worked it on out. It's in here loose now. Got all the bolts out of it. You can see it wobbles around a little bit. I'm going to see if there's somewhere I can stick this camera and get a good view of me pulling it out. See what that looks like. Too high. Alright, here we go. We'll see what kind of camera that looks, camera angle that looks. Alright, so the thing's loose now. I'm going to see if I can just wiggle it out of here. It's probably going to be easier to come out this side. The brake lever's on the other side. So I've never done this before, so we'll find out. There might be, sometimes there's one way easier than another one, so we'll see if it'll come out of here like this. If not, we'll drop back and punt. Carburetor appears to be holding it a little bit. And let me see if I can loosen that back clamp on the carburetor boot. Naturally, that one's about stripped out. Somebody's done about stripped the Phillips head out on it. Oh, it turns. Alright, pop the carburetor over to the side and then get it off the boot, just like that. Lay it right there. And now let's see what we can do. Now it looks like that radiator hose is in the way. I may have to unbolt. God, it's going to be aggravating now. I don't really want to take them off. Tell you what I may do. I may see if I can loosen those two, or remove those two bottom bolts on the radiator. Radiators. And let this swing forward enough to get it to come out of there. That might not work, but we'll give it a shot. Yeah, it's not letting it slide up right just far enough. I think I'm gonna have to take at least take the hose off of these radiators. So let me try that. I'll cut the camera back on in a sec. Actually, I just wasn't holding my mouth right. What I ended up doing is tilting the motor over just a little bit here and rotating it like this, and it cleared this radiator hose. I still got the bolts loose on the bottom of it. Cleared that radiator hose, but now it's cleared the swing arm as well. So now it's just a matter of sliding it out of here. But I think I'm gonna have an issue on this side with the dang kickstart. So let me pull the kickstart off and it should come out. Alright, so I unbolted the kickstart and the motor practically fell out. Just hitting over there on that side. So you just pick this thing up. These little two-stroke motors don't weigh nothing. All aluminum. They're very, very light. So that's how you get the motor out. Probably tear down a little bit on it and see if I can figure out what's making it not turn over no better than it is. And probably try to cut the camera back on. I guess let y'all see what I'm doing. It took me about 50 minutes to do this, and that's with me not really knowing what to do. So if you watch my video, you should probably be able to do it even faster than that. I did use a couple air tools here and there. It's a little easier than by hand, but that's pretty much the gist of it. I'm gonna knock this bolt back in here so the swing arm don't fall off, and probably tape up that carburetor, because this is probably gonna sit outside for just probably a week or so till I can get the parts in and get it back together. So I'll do all that, and then I'll cut the camera back on when I get started on taking it apart. Alright guys, I'm back on this little RM 125 I pulled off a little while ago. We'll tear this thing down. Start with taking this head off. I'm not sure what in the world's wrong with this thing, but it doesn't feel like it's got any compression when you kick it over. So I'm going to start by taking this off, then probably going to take this power valve cover off and see about getting the cylinder and all that off. So let me jump on that. I'll cut the camera back on. These are 12mm nuts here. I'm just going to hit them with the impact and get it off. So I'll cut the camera right back on. Alright, so I got the head off this thing now. I got these couple 12mm bolts. Actually, there's two of them here, and I'm going to have to use a wrench to get this one because the socket won't get on there. And we'll take this cover off here for the power valve. 4 8mm bolts on there, and then I'm probably going to have to take a screwdriver and pry that off. And there is a there we go. There is another bolt in here, 12mm head bolt. So you'll need to take this power valve. It don't look like something's right in there, but you have to take that off to get the cylinder off. I'm also going to take this cover off here just to look in here. I don't even know what's inside of this one, so I'm going to take that front cover off as well. Alright, I'll pull these off and cut the camera back on in a second. Alright guys, I've got the power valve arm loose here, and took this cover off just to get in here to them. I probably didn't really have to do that, but I just wanted to see what was in there. And then got this bolt loose, nut loose, and the other 12mm nut on this side loose, and now the cylinder will come off. I'm going to probably set the camera down and make sure I don't break the gasket. I really don't want to replace the gasket on this thing because they are pretty new. Like I said before, this thing's been rebuilt fairly recently, so I'm gonna maybe take a razor blade or something and slide around there to make sure the gasket doesn't get stuck on anything and I don't tear it. So let me see if I can do that real quick. Actually, I think we're too late. I believe it's already torn on that side, so anyway, we'll go with it. I'm thinking, this guy said he thought something was wrong with the crank on here. I don't know really how it happened, but this piston appears to be melted. You can look right. See that little, it looks like an edge there on it. It actually is an edge, and the piston's melted. It looks like it left a little bit of piston material on the cylinder there. Cylinder doesn't really look bad other than that spot, and the piston really don't look bad, but it is it's melted right there. Honestly, the crank feels tight. I think this thing might just need another piston rings in it. Hold that cylinder and see what that does, because it doesn't appear anything's wrong with the bottom end. I don't really know what would cause the thing to melt like that, unless it was they were maybe running it real lean or something. But I believe that's what happened. But anyway, let me get this guy a call and see what he says about it. If that's the case, that'll make a repair a whole lot easier. Just hold that cylinder a little bit, put another piston rings in it, or ring in it, and see what it does. I'll cut the camera back on in a sec. Alright guys, I'm back working on this little RM125. Pretty sure this, either the fuel mixture wasn't quite right or something happened and melted this piston down a little bit and made it lose compression and all. So what I'm going to do is put a new piston in it, rings, got some gaskets and all that too for it. So I didn't bore it out, I just honed the cylinder, kind of cleaned it up, and also cleaned it up with a little bit of transmission fluid to get all the excess grindings off of there. So now what I'm going to do is take this piston out. You just catch the snap ring, usually use a little pick, catch the snap ring, work it out, push the pin out, and then stick the other one back in. Just make note of where this arrow is on here. This is actually an aftermarket Wiseco piston on here, but the arrow points toward the exhaust port. Make sure you put it back in the same place. So let me get this thing slid off, and then I'll get the new one back on. I'll cut the camera on in a sec. Alright guys, I like to go ahead and put one of the snap rings in one side. I did check the numbers on this and they're exactly the same. This thing is different than most of the 4-strokes I work on. It does have a roller bearing in the wrist pin there. So I got a new one of those that comes with the kit. And the main thing on these little snap rings is you just want to make sure the end of the ring doesn't wind up in that hole. These are pretty deep in there, so it's pretty easy to put them on, but just work it around with a screwdriver. You can stick one end of the snap ring into the hole, into the groove I mean, and then press the other one around, pry it in a little bit, and it'll pop right in there. That one there, when I put it in by itself, it actually kind of got a little sideways in there. You just want to make sure you keep your finger over these holes, because if that snap ring shoots off of there, you won't ever find it. So that's it. I'm gonna shoot a little bit of oil on this pin when I stick it in, and also gonna put that the new wrist pin roller bearing in there. And there again, make sure that arrow is pointing down as it was on the first one. So we'll do that. Also probably gonna clean up a little bit of this gasket material. I do have a new gasket to go on here, base gasket, so I'll get that cleaned up as well. Alright, I'll cut the camera back on right before I put the cylinder on. Also guys, on this ring, I got the snap rings in there and the wrist pin. There is a stamp on it. This one says N50 just because it's oversized, 1/2 millimeter. You just want to make sure that the numbers are pointing upwards, and there's a pin right here that the end of this ring has to line up with, so just make sure you get the ring in that right orientation. Alright guys, I'm going to see if I can show me putting this base gasket on and the cylinder back on. Like I said, clean up a little bit of this excess gasket material off. There's not much on there. A little chunk right here. And a little right here. Just using a regular old razor blade to scrape these off. And clean that maintenance surface with a little brake cleaner. Just get any of the excess oil off of it. Make sure we get a good seal on it, and then take the gaskets that come with the kit. And install this base gasket. It's probably just as easy to put it on here first. You don't want to put any kind of RTV or anything on these. Of all the gaskets that I've ever done on motors, the only ones I've ever had problems with were these base gaskets. Just from the torque of the head, it will actually squeeze these gaskets out of there. So you must put RTV on any gasket except for the base gasket. Alright, so now I'm going to put this little cylinder on here. Got a little bit of oil in it. Really all you got to do is just, you can squeeze these rings together with your hands enough to get it to slide on. You need to make note that you do have that ring in the right spot there. It lines up on that pin that I showed you before. Alright, so I got it pretty much in there. Kind of wiggle it as it goes down. And as you push it down, make sure you get the power valve lever stuck up in there. So just push this thing down on here. There are also two dowels on this motor. One here and one here. We'll make sure those are still in there. And there it is. Snaps all the way down. So then now I'm gonna look the torques back up on these head bolts and torque these, or not the head bolts, on these base gasket bolts, base cylinder bolts. Torque them down. Then we'll probably change these rings out just so we can make sure we don't have any issues with that. And I'll put the head on here in just a second. I'll cut the camera back on in a second. Alright guys, I got these cylinder bolts. They're actually supposed to be torqued to like 18 foot-pounds, but you can't get a torque wrench, or a socket at least, on these two front ones. So you just pretty much tighten them down as tight as you can with just a 12mm wrench. And that's plenty enough torque. Same thing with this head. It's 18 foot-pounds as well. It's pretty clean on here. I did replace those two O-rings on there. So you just slide that thing over like that, and make sure you put your little copper washers on there as well. Help seal that thing up before you put your nuts on. And like I said before, these nuts need to be torqued to 18 foot-pounds, and torque them. They normally recommend doing them like a crisscross pattern, and do it two or three different settings. So I usually go like, this one's 18, I might go 10 and 10 and then 18 foot-pounds or something like that. With 18 foot-pounds you don't have a whole lot of, you go less than 10 foot-pounds, that ain't a whole lot of torque. So what I'll do is I'll torque these on, keep going at a diagonal so it evenly distributes across the head. And then I will put a gasket on this side over here for the power valve, and also need to hook up this power valve. Just a lever goes in this little plastic holder, and also this power valve cover on the front. I'm going to change that gasket all on it. So let me get both of those put on, and this head torqued down, and then I'll cut the camera back on in just a sec. Alright folks, got the power valve cover on. Also, I guess this is also a power valve cover. Got all that stuff tightened up, torqued the head bolts down. Need to tighten up the spark plug, and then we'll be ready to stick it back on the bike. These two-stroke motors are definitely by far a whole lot easier to rebuild than a four-stroke, with it not having to deal with any valves or anything on here. Well, adjusting valves or intake or exhaust valve or anything like that, because actually these things, the piston kind of acts like the valve, I guess you would say. So that makes it a little easier. The only thing I've got left to put on this motor is this side cover, but I'm going to leave it off until I get the clutch lever hooked back up on it. So I'm going to get the bike over here, set it up on a bucket so we can get to it, and stick the motor back in it. Alright, cut the camera back on in just a sec. Alright guys, I went ahead and pulled the gas tank off, the seat, the side plastics. I went ahead and took these 4 bolts out of the radiators, 2 on this side and 2 on the other side, to let this hose right here get out of the way, because that was pretty tight getting it in there before, or getting it out of there before. I had taped up the intake on the carburetor here, so let me get all the tape off of it, because I do store these things outside, well, under a shed, but outside while I'm waiting on motor parts. So I'll get this peeled off, and I'm gonna try to set the camera up somewhere or another so I can, maybe y'all can see when I put this thing back in. So let me get the camera set up on the other side, and then I'll slide the motor in from this left side. Alright guys, let's see how long that battery pack lasts. Got the motor over, ready to go in. One thing I kind of forgot to do is you do have to pull this swing arm bolt out. I got this thing sitting on a little less than a 5-gallon bucket, so the back tire is actually on the ground, so that should help us out in not letting the swing arm fall off. But let me knock this thing out. Actually, I don't have to knock it all the way out, just get it past this last little spot here so that the motor can slide in there. So let me knock that out and I'll cut the camera back on. Sorry, I forgot about that. Alright, I got the swing arm bolt out. Let me see if I can stick this thing in here now. I really can't remember how it went in before, so we're just going to try and see what I can do. Carburetor is kind of in the way here. I think that's how it goes. See if I can get that carburetor out of there. That should make it a whole lot easier. What you kind of need to do is get that back part between the swing arms lined up, close to lined up, and rotate it around until the motor sits in there straight. Just like that. That's pretty close on the back end. Wiggle this front around, and then those bolt holes will line up. So that's pretty much it. Let me stick those bolts in. They're 2 different lengths. You got a real long one. As far as these bottom motor mounts go, I believe the very bottom was the longest one. Just want to stick these in and not tighten them up yet, because you still got to get that the swing arm bolt to go through there, and it might take a little wiggling to get it through. There you go, the top one's in. And pick the back of the motor up a little bit and get the bottom one in. Just like that. And then now you see if you can knock the swing arm bolt through there. You do have to press down on this brake lever once you get so far in. Just like that. I got to rotate that thing around so it fits in a notch, but that's pretty much it on putting the motor mounts back in, or motor mount bolts back in. So let me get the nuts started on those, and then I'll cut the camera back on. Next thing I'm probably going to do is go ahead and bolt these back up, the radiator and the radiator hoses. You got the one hose here, and then the top hose here needs to go, actually it loops around here, it needs to go in the top of the motor there. So get that on, and I'll cut the camera back on. Alright guys, I got the motor mount bolts tightened up. Also got the swing arm bolt back through here. Just tapped through with a hammer. It's got a washer and then that other big nut that goes on it. That's not it. I'll have to grab it. But anyway, also got the clutch hooked back up. Back the clutch adjustment down here pretty good bit, just so I can get that lever back on. That cable back on. I may have to adjust that back out. Hook the spark plug up, the top radiator hose, that bottom radiator hose. Now I need to put this engine mount back on. I actually labeled these before I took them apart. Hopefully this is going to fit back up like it's supposed to. So this goes in supposedly on the right side. This is all going to line up, or if I put my markings in the right location. Sorry about the camera work there. It's hard for me to look with my eyes and look with the camera at the same time. Alright, got that one in. Got the other end. Yep, that appears to match up. And then do this other side. Yes, so that matches up. Stick the bolt through here for the top motor mount bolt, and then tighten all that up. And so I'll do that and tighten up the swing arm bolt, and then I'll plug this wire back in here and put the cover back on, and I'll cut the camera on right before I put the carburetor back on. Alright guys, I'd hope if you got this deep into a motor job that you would know how to put your chain on, but some people might not, so I'll show you how to do it. Got the chain back on here and put the master link in it. You can see it there, and it has this extra link here that goes on there. Press that on as far as it'll go, and then you have this little locking plate, I guess you could call it, and it always goes in the direction of travel, so the chain's going in this direction, and so you put the front of the plate heading that way, and then you can just take a pair of pliers and squeeze this plate on there just like that, and that's it. So now there's a little case saver here. I don't really know how much that does, but it goes on there, goes there, and then this other plate here goes on there, 2 bolts, and then I've still got to put this cover on the side here with a few other bolts, and we'll be put the carburetor on. We'll be about ready to crank this thing up. So let me get those few bolts in the cover, and I still haven't hooked up this wire, but I'll hook it up too. Alright, cut the camera on in a minute. Alright, I think I got everything buttoned up now. Got this carburetor back in. I'll go ahead and tell you, this ain't the easiest thing to get in here. Found about the only way I could get it in was to take the clamp off here and slide this back in first, and then finally get it pushed back far enough so it would go past this boot. So I'm going to have to fish that clamp back around there, as well as tighten this one up. So that's pretty much all I got left to do. Also, I forgot about it, but I got to put the kickstart on the other side, as well as the header pipe laying over there on the floor. So get both of those on, and put the gas tank back on this thing and we'll see if it'll crank up. I'll cut the camera back on in a sec. Alright guys, I'm gonna see if I can catch the first start up of this thing. I don't have any coolant in it, so I'm just gonna let it see if I can get it to crank, and then I'll cut it off. It's getting kind of late anyway, and I'm not real sure how loud this thing's gonna be. So I did check the oil in the bottom end and it's good, so we'll give this thing a couple kicks and see if we can get it to crank. Go ahead and cut the choke on just in case, and cut the gas on. Let's see what it'll do. I'm not sure if I can kick the thing hard enough here. Cut the choke off. Let me cut it back on and see what it makes any difference. Well, I guess the next thing to do is make sure the thing's sparking. So let me pull this plug out, make sure it's at least sparking before I start kicking it a whole lot more. I'll cut the camera back on in a sec. Alright guys, give this thing one more shot. I think figured out what the problem was. Had it in gear. Won't crank in gear, especially when the back tire's touching the ground. So let's see what it'll do now. Well, there you go. One thing, it won't crank in gear. And I think it might be leaking a little gas out the bottom of the carburetor, so I might have to pull that dang carburetor back off of it. But anyway, crank up. So, put some coolant in it, figure out why the carburetor's leaking, and move on to the next project. Alright, appreciate you guys watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, do all that stuff. Check out my videos. Don't do many of these dirt bikes, but here in the last couple weeks I've done, this is the third one, so mostly deal with four-wheelers, but I figured if I had it in there, might as well take a video. Got a little Warrior back there in the back, and we'll probably work on, be the next video I put up. But alright, appreciate you guys watching. Have a good night.